What's good, fight fans? Your Majesty speak. So, Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua. We're about 2.5, 3 weeks away from that fight. But I don't know, man. Something about this fight that throws me off. I don't know if it's the fact that Jake went from getting ready to fight Tank, who was a 135-pound guy normally. Of course, I'm pretty sure he walks around bigger in between his fights or in between weight classes, or in between training camps or whatever the case may be. But to go from fighting and preparing against people like Shakur Stevenson and Ray Ford and Montana Love to prepare for Tank Davis, to jump to which in a month's time going into sparring people like Frank Sanchez and Lawrence Okolie, which I haven't heard anybody come out and say anything about Lawrence Okolie being a friend of Anthony Joshua and training and preparing Jake Paul to beat Anthony Joshua. I know when Boots Ennis went and helped Canelo, it was a problem. When Shakur Stevenson went and helped Jake Paul for Tank, people had an issue with it. But I haven't heard anybody come out and say Lawrence Okolie is the ops or anything like that. And I'm just, got my ear to the street because I'm waiting to hear it. Everybody like to create their own narratives or whatever the case may be. But I just want to know if this fight is fake or real. Is this a real fight? I know Anthony Joshua has a stipulation where he can't weigh more than 145 pounds at weighing in. I'm not sure if it's a rehydration clause or anything like that, which we normally don't have to deal with stuff like that for these heavyweight fights. So I'm interested to see what the particulars are on. Is it just him weighing in at 245? And if he weighing at 245, it don't matter what he come in to fight as, or do he have to come in to fight or weigh in at 245 and then come in to fight at a certain weight? Or if he doesn't meet that, does the fight still take place? I'm interested to know what the particulars are, but just to know that Anthony Joshua, I think he was preparing for a fight for some guy named Cassius, who also is in Jake Paul's camp, helping him prepare for Anthony Joshua. I know heavyweights don't normally worry about making a certain weight. They may have a goal weight in mind that they may feel more comfortable at, or they may feel like, if I'm fighting a smaller guy, I need to be a little lighter so that I can be able to deal with his footwork, or I may need to be able to be a little heavier so that I can kind of impose my will on him. So I don't know what Anthony Joshua's training camp was like for Cassius or what his plan was for him, but I do know to be able to, Anthony Joshua, if I'm not mistaken, comes in, fights somewhere between 250, 248 or something like that. So I don't see it being a big issue. But once again, I don't know where Anthony Joshua is. Once again, we haven't seen Joshua since the Daniel Dubois fight. So there's no telling how much weight he may have gained. He don't look any different when I seen him in the face-off or the press conference or whatever the case may be. So I'm wondering how much of an issue making 145 is going to be for Anthony Joshua, as well as are there any particulars outside of him just making that 245 weigh-in? Is there a 10-pound rehydration clause? Is there a rehydration clause at all? These are things that I want to know. But it's odd to me that Jake Paul is willing to jump from Tank to Anthony Joshua in a month's time. And I'm wondering if he has some type of insight about Anthony Joshua that we may not be privy to. Now, I do know that Anthony Joshua he would be labeled as a chinny fighter. We've seen Anthony Joshua, get hit on his chin a bunch of times and, do the happy dance or whatever you want to call it, Bambi legs, whatever they call it. And his chin has failed him a lot, especially in the Daniel Dubois fight. It failed him in the Andy Ruiz fight. Dillian White cracked him, and he had Bambi legs. We've seen this plenty of times from Anthony Joshua. So I'm wondering if Jake is thinking, if I land this right hand on AJ, I could knock his big ass out. But I think it is when I look at Jake Paul's fights, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer or whatever the case may be, but when I look at Jake's fights, to me, and this is just to me, do I think he has some type of NDA clause that will allow these guys to make him look good? I believe he does. Even though I'm one of those people that says Mike Tyson is 60, I saw Mike Tyson pulling punches. I saw Mike Tyson like pretty much sitting there biting his glove. And yes, I've seen Mike do that before, but not that much, especially against somebody who is a novice, which of course he has been fighting, so I don't want to be disrespectful to him. But compared to Mike Tyson, he is a novice. So, and then in the Julio Cesar Chavez fight, I do know Julio Cesar Chavez is one of those fighters who will check out in the middle of a fight, but he also didn't seem like he was willing to punch with Jake Paul outside of maybe like the last round or two. And so I'm just wondering if Anthony Joshua has one of those clauses too, because that's the only way that I can see Jake Paul even being competitive in this fight. Because as chinny as Anthony Joshua is, he is getting hit by big guys. Like Daniel Dubois is damn near 245, 250, 260, somewhere in that range. Andy Ruiz was a big boy. He might have been diminutive in height, but he's a big guy. Dillian White is a big dude, and so it was big guys hitting Anthony Joshua that was causing him to go noodle leg or whatever the case may be. But I think that this is a win-win for Jake Paul. And I say that in the sense of if it is rigged, if it ain't rigged, I think it's a win-win for Jake Paul because people have been clamoring for Jake Paul to fight a real fighter since probably he whooped Nate Robinson. And I think that Jake has honestly done it the right way. He didn't have an amateur background. And so he spent his first 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 fights fighting guys who were MMA guys that weren't real boxing guys, but neither was Jake. And so I don't have a problem with him taking those fights and, trying to build his experience level with guys who are combat guys, but not necessarily guys who box. So the fact that he went from 60-year-old Tyson, which I think it was bullcrap, to Julio Cesar Chavez, who was a real fighter, he's over the hill. And now, and to Tank Davis, which I thought was going to be a circus. I was actually interested in that fight because I wanted to see, how was Tank going to handle somebody that big? What was Jake going to do as far as trying to catch somebody that crafty? Because Tank wouldn't have been easy to hit, regardless of how big you are. Tank ain't an easy person to hit, especially with his experience level and him having tricks and stuff like that, and Jake not really, being experienced. I think credit needs to be given to Jake Paul, win-win, whether he wins or whether he loses against Anthony Joshua, because I know me, when I looked at him take the Tank fight, I looked at it as, oh, you trying to, be a bully or whatever. And so for him to jump from that Tank fight and move to Anthony Joshua, who is probably the same amount of height difference and size difference as he was to Tank to Jake Paul, you got to give him credit. And I think that even if Jake Paul, I think with Jake Paul being the media personality that he is, Jake Paul is mainly looking for a viral moment. And I think Jake Paul will take a viral moment, whether it's him knocking Anthony Joshua out or Anthony Joshua knocking him out. Either way, Jake goes viral. I don't think Jake gives a fuck about us, the boxing media, or fans like me having an opinion on him getting knocked the fuck out. I think his main goal is going viral and the amount of money that he can make from it. However, I do think either way, if he beats Anthony Joshua, it grows his fan base. If he loses and goes viral, I think people are going to respect Jake Paul just for even taking the fight. So for me, I don't know if it's rigged. I believe it may be, but if it ain't, I still think Jake Paul is in a win-win situation, whether he loses or whether he wins. Even if he makes it the distance with Anthony Joshua, he's gonna get a level of respect from people. And so when I look at the pros and cons of this fight from Jake Paul, he's in a much better situation than he was in if he'd have beat Tank, or if Tank would have whooped him. Because if you did beat Tank, Tank was little as hell. If you got knocked out by Tank or lost to Tank, you big as shit, and Tank was little as hell. So I think he's in a much better position taking this Anthony Joshua fight, regardless of what happens. And like I said, I hope it's not rigged. I want to see AJ do what he did to Francis Ngannou, or however the fuck you say his name, Francis Ngannou. No disrespect to him, but let me know what y'all think in the comments. Let me know. Do y'all think it's a rigged fight? Do y'all think that Jake is in a win-win situation? Do you think it's going to be bad for Jake if he loses? Let me know what y'all think in the comments. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, please do so. If you have not hit the notification bell, please do so as well, so that you will be notified when I drop future videos. And until next time.